I'm not exaggerating when I say that Bebop Deluxe are the most overlooked and undeservedly underappreciated bands of the 1970s. They're glam, they're prog, they're new wave, they're blues, hard rock, and proto electronica. They did everything. They have catchy pop songs, intense chops, a great sense of fun, and a fearless approach to genre hopping. And yet they saw such a teeny tiny modicum of chart success that I'm just a little bit lost for words. There's a good chance you may not even have heard of them, particularly if you're an American. It's a massive shame, really. Whatever their commercial success or lack thereof, they produced 5 albums and 1 live album, all of which are either good or very good. Their first album, Axe Victim, and their third, Sunburst Finish, are my personal favourites, but the other three, Futurama, Modern Music, and Drastic Plastic, are worth checking out for anyone who's a fan of 70s music or just music in general. And don't forget to check out Live in the Air Age to hear a band as confident in concert as they were in the studio. Adventures in a Yorkshire Landscape is a particularly impressive performance on that record. Originally just a 3-minute tune, here it gets the extended 8-minute long prog treatment with a truly immense guitar solo at the end. Seriously, Bill Nelson cements himself as an absolute guitar legend on that album. By turns, melodic, flashy, subtle, histrionic, and just straightforwardly loud. It's just great. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you now about just one of their songs, and I'm not exaggerating here, perfect slice of new wave, pop, rock, prog, whatever it is, Ships in the Night, from the aforementioned album from 1976, Sunburst Finish. So, seriously, if you've not heard this song before, and this is your introduction to it and the band, pause me now and go listen to the full song, whether the album or the single version. Go on, please, just listen to the track, it's great. Like a square peg in a round hole, like a harp without its strings, like a sailor who sails no oceans, like a bird that has no wings. Without love, I have no treasures. Without love, my light is dim. Without love, I have no treasures. Without love, this song should clearly have been a hit, right? It's great. Catchy, energetic, dynamic, smart. It's kind of cool in that 70s English nerdy dudes in suits kind of way. It has an actually very groovy sax solo. It has a fat bass line, a nice jazzy electric piano solo. And yet this song and basically their entire back catalogue have been assigned to the proverbial dustbin of music history. Not even that, in fact. That kind of implies that they've been relegated to that status. But the reality is that they were never that big at all. A couple of their albums charted, but just and only really in the UK. So out of the studio albums, Modern Music got the closest to the UK top 10, peaking at number 12, and Live in the Air Age did manage to hit number 10. Yay. But that was pretty much it. A couple others just scraped into the top 30, and the first two didn't chart at all, as far as I can tell. So before we dive straight into looking at the song itself, let's look at why this might have happened. Why would such a good band see so little commercial success? Well, firstly, if you don't know the band, you'll have to simply trust my good taste when I insist that they are in fact underrated. That's asking for a lot, I know. But seriously, I think the reasons are quite clear. I think they were quite often simply seen as following in others' shadows, and the prevailing opinion of them has always been that they're basically just second-rate glam or maybe second-rate prog. In particular, they were seen as David Bowie ripoffs. This image, this myth, in fact, is so dominant that the one and only time I've ever heard their music played in a public place, once, a couple of years ago in a guitar shop, it was being played to a customer solely as an example of a David Bowie ripoff. So is there any justification in this reputation? Maybe. Yeah, I don't really think so, though. I think it all boils down to two things. A, their image, which certainly started off very 70s glam. But you know, it was 1974. That's what everyone was doing in the UK. I don't think it's fair at all to hold this against Bebop Deluxe. Though one could argue by 1974 it had become a little bit passé. A little bit obvious maybe? Whatever. I think 50 years later we can get past all that. And B, I think they did themselves a little bit of a disservice with the song titles on their debut album. This reputation seems to have stuck with them for a long time. So let's look at some of those song titles. We have Night Creatures,
Darkness, Le Moraliste, Third Floor Heaven, and particularly Jet Silver and the Dolls of Venus. These are all very 70s glam and very David Bowie. Do you know what I mean? We have Jet Silver and the Dolls of Venus, Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Strong similarities here. It's an odd coincidence that 1974 also saw the release of another glam title, often, and I think fairly accused of ripping off that same format. T-Rex's album, Zinc Alloy and the Hidden Riders of Tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? We have quirky name and there's something sci-fi of something cool. They all do that sort of thing. And to be doing it just a couple years after David Bowie's huge, internationally successful album does look like jumping on the bandwagon a bit. And to be completely honest, T-Rex's album isn't great. It's possibly their worst. But Bebop Deluxe's debut is a very good album. Yeah, it sounds a bit like David Bowie. It's sort of sophisticated rock and roll with an arty twist, sort of trashy lyrics about showbiz and science fiction stuff. But where Bowie leans much more into music hall but rock pop and loungy jazz, Bebop Deluxe goes more obviously proggy, very bluesy, hard rock, much more guitar heavy, which is saying a lot given how guitar-centric David Bowie's early 70s music can be. Bill Nelson, the singer, songwriter, guitarist, visionary, and frontman of Bebop Deluxe, is a brilliant guitarist. Really brilliant. A true guitar hero with chops, aplenty, melodic, flashy, fast, and just a really unique style. A personal favorite of Gary Newman as well. Good taste, Gary. So, yeah, I do concede some similarities with Bowie, but don't let their reputation or song titles fool you. Their music is entirely its own individual thing, and it really stands apart from the rest of 70s glam and prog. Maybe that's where some of the problem lies, though. They're not fully prog, they're not fully glam, they're sort of prog pop, smart glam, glam prog or something. But then at the same time, there was a huge market for that music in the 1970s, so I'm kind of back around to being at a loss again. Why were these guys never big? Anyway, this song that I'm talking about today, Ships in the Night, was recorded and released in 1976 with the second iteration of the band comprised of Bill Nelson, Simon Fox on drums, we have Andy Clark on keyboards, and Charlie Tumahai on bass. First Bebop Deluxe was actually only together for the first album, after which they broke up and Bill Nelson reformed the band entirely with these new members. It kind of doesn't matter that much that it's an entirely new band, given that it's really all about Bill. He writes all the songs, plays guitar, which is the instrumental star of the show here. He sings, co-produces, and fronts the band. Okay, so maybe that's not entirely fair. All of the band members are very good, and knowing how bands work, I have no doubt that each band member will have contributed significantly to the overall sound, whether they get songwriting credit or not. But it really is Bill's band, and it's his personality that shines through in these songs. So back to our song, Ships in the Night. What makes this song work? As I've talked about many times, understanding how a song works always boils down to genre and form. This is simply because that's what we understand first. Our brain does a lot of automatic interpretive legwork that we don't or can't really consciously do quite a lot of the time. At least nowhere near as quickly. So in the same way that you don't need to be able to individually identify, say, turmeric, cumin, and fenugreek to know that maybe you're eating a dish from India or Pakistan, or you don't need to know much about architecture to know that a building is like really old or Northern European as opposed to Middle Eastern. We don't need to be able to consciously identify a key change, instrumentation, a mode, or time signature, or whatever, to know the genre conventions that a song is working within and conveying to you. And it is this automatic understanding of genre that shapes our expectations and experience of music. So, central to this song's success, artistic success, that is, not particularly commercially, unfortunately, although it did, get into the top 20. Central to this song's success is the mix of genres that it incorporates within the wider generic framework of, I don't know what we settled on, art rock, new wave, prog rock, pop rock. I don't know, but that's precisely the point. It's a hard one to pin down. So the song starts off with some arpeggiated guitar chords played at a declining tempo. This is a very brief intro that only actually appears on the album version and not on the single. Not much to say yet, and to be honest, hardly worth mentioning. Anyway, once that arpeggio bit comes to a stop, we get a quick percussion hit and a staccato chord on guitar, a nice crunchy C power chord, followed by an 8/8 keyboard lick. Wait, 8/8 you say? Yes, yeah, 8/8, that's right. Not a super common meter, but one you do occasionally hear. It's not immediately sensical to call something 8/8, given that it's basically just the equivalent of 4/4, right? But what we have here is two triplets followed by two eighth notes. So what we have is 1 and a 2 and a 3 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and. We have 3 plus 3 plus 2 equals 8. 8 eighth notes. Cool, huh? This figure repeats while the guitar comes in with these big sort of Who-like power chords. This power chord and synth arrangement reminds me of a sort of quirkier Baba O'Reilly or Won't Get Fooled Again. It's a similar sort of thing, but here we get some funky drumming and some nice double track guitar added to the mix. This song doesn't really show off Bill's guitar playing, but trust me, this guy can play fast. Really though, it's still nice playing all the way throughout and everything serves the song very well. The synth keeps up that 8/8 figure while the verses kick into a kind of stop-start sort of guitar, bass and drum thing while Bill sings. I really like this song's verses. Super simple when it comes to it, with the guitar just playing C, D, F, and G power chords. This entire song is very simple, harmonically speaking. But the staccato and on and off beat here nicely accentuates the similarly staccato singing. The lyrics are also pretty straightforward. They're just a list of, I don't know, out of place stuff or objects or creatures without the things that make them what they are. They're just kind of cliches, right? Square peg in a round hole certainly is. Either way, they're simple, but in my opinion, very effective. So what works so well about this song is the change between sections. The chorus is even simpler, really, than the verse. Now we just have three chords, C to G, F back to G. And now we're fully into these sustained, almost Townshend-y style power chords with some added backing vocals. It's a nice chorus and it works smartly as a continuation of the verse's themes, musically and lyrically. So the chorus answers the verses like her, taking us now to him personally. Without you, I am a desert, my light is dim, etc. So before we look at the next section, I want to talk about the main thing that makes Bebop Deluxe and this song interesting, which I think I just really recently realized. What's the best way to put this? You know how people often say quality over quantity? That is to say, it's better to have a bit of something very good than loads of something a bit average or crap. I definitely do agree with that. It's truly a good principle for songwriting or anything really. But what happens when quantity becomes a quality of its own? What do I mean? Well, maybe it's not as applicable to this song as to other Bebop Deluxe songs, but quite often Bill Nelson's songwriting works so well because you simply don't have time to get used to one section before he dazzles you with the next. He's not a Paul McCartney of melody, nor is he a Bob Dylan of lyrics. He's not a Jimmy Page of instrumental arrangement. He's not a Freddie Mercury of singing. Now, okay, so those are very, very high standards to set. I get that. But what I'm basically saying is that beyond virtuosic guitar playing, which he's actually very restrained with, he's not really absolutely amazing at any single one thing. There isn't really one main singular star of the show, no single main draw to Bebop Deluxe. But Bill Nelson is good at a lot of things, and he tends to apply them all at least a little bit and always very well in every song. Ships in the Night is not necessarily the most extreme example of this in the Bebop Deluxe song though. For that, I'd say you might want to check out something like Sleep That Burns, which is an absolute tour de force in songwriting techniques and tricks. Layers of instruments and sounds, dramatic pauses, tempo and dynamic changes, genre switching, rock riffs, backwards guitar playing, and some really nice backing vocal arrangements. It's got a bit of everything. It's exhilarating. This, then, is Bebop Deluxe's main draw, doing it all in pretty much every song. Ships in the Night might not do it to the same extent that Sleep That Burns does, but it still does it aplenty. Already, by the time we hit that chorus, we've gone through a fair bit of dynamic change from the quieter intro to the stop-start verse with loads of space into a really straightforward chorus with backing vocals and big power chords. And as soon as that first chorus ends, the band hops into a reggae-ish or ska kind of beat, and the song moves into the relative minor of A minor. I'd maybe call this bit the post-chorus. So I looked that up, and it is actually a thing, though not super common necessarily. So we can call it a post-chorus, but honestly, we could also just kind of call it a second chorus. Or we could maybe consider what I call the chorus the pre-chorus, and this is the chorus. I think I'm confusing myself here. Maybe this is part of the issue with the band. They're certainly not obviously inaccessible given their pop sensibilities, and this is one of their most straightforward songs structurally speaking, but I guess it is still a little bit labyrinthine for a shortish kind of pop song. Interestingly, Bill Nelson said that Ships in the Night is his least favorite track on this album, and that it was basically just written in order to please their record company who were, in his words, looking for something that they could release as a single. I'd never considered the band to be anything but an album band. I considered hit singles as belonging to the domain of ephemeral pop acts rather than the currency of serious rock band. Part of me respects his artistic vision and integrity and all that, but another part of me thinks this is maybe a little bit po-faced. You know, there's nothing wrong with a good single, and lots of very serious artists happily embraced singles as a format. Not that I'm complaining, I really like Bebop Deluxe albums, but maybe we're really starting to get to the bottom of their lack of commercial success, maybe? Anyway, as soon as that post-chorus reggae section in A minor ends, we hear this cool ascending keyboard bit in 9/16. Then we basically just start from the beginning of the song again with the 8/8 keyboard bit, those cool guitar chords, double track guitar licks, and nice drumming. This is cut a little short in the single version though. So once we get to the second verse, we have some additional backing vocals echoing the lead vocal a bit, and then we hear the second chorus. And those big power chords that we heard the first time round have now been completely abandoned. This chorus sounds much more like a middle ground between the verse's stop-start rhythm and the post-chorus's reggae feel. It's a very effective variation, I think, and it makes this chorus sound quite different to the first. But it's also an odd choice to abandon a really strong chorus arrangement. I really like the big power chords we heard the first time around. I think to a casual listener, this change could maybe mar the continuity of the song a little bit. You would expect each chorus to sound pretty much exactly the same, right? Either way, we then go back into that A minor reggae post-chorus section, we hear that ascending keyboard bit again, then straight back into a reggae part, but now we have a sax solo. Great. It's a really nice sax solo actually. After that solo, we're back into the ascending keyboard bit, and now it's time for a really nice electric piano solo over the reggae section. Both of these solos are super tasty and both are kept in the single edit. There's not much to say here, just really nice solos, not super wild or super flashy, but as I say, tasty. The single version of the song closes on an extended version of that same ascending keyboard pattern while fading out. So it just ends up sounding like this eternally ascending lick. It keeps going on and going on and going on and on and on and on. The album version though goes on and on a bit. And then it concludes on, we finish on the G chord. So instead of wrapping up with a perfect cadence back to C, they opt to end with the dominant chord hanging, which actually sounds much better. Seriously, if you have an instrument, listen to this song and play a C chord at the end right after the G chord. It actually sounds a bit lame doing that, right? It's too neat. So there's no real requirement in music, particularly pop and rock, to end on the tonic chord, but it is the usual choice. It's much more of a standard expectation in classical music, and for a good century so, back in the olden days, virtually every single composition in classical music did as a rule. But to most rock fans, this won't sound that unusual, After all, fade outs are super common and they certainly don't end on the song's tonic by definition. Nonetheless, this does mean that this last chord in Ships in the Night sort of lingers there expectedly, wanting that resolution, but we don't get it. So that's how Ships in the Night works. It's actually a harder song to pin down than I initially expected when I started thinking about this song, and I'm not really sure if I have pinned it down even now. After all, it's not super complex. It has straightforward lyrics, harmonically very simple, some cool rhythm stuff going on, but nothing wild. It's quirky, but it's not a super out there song. In spite of its middling chart success, you could easily imagine this playing on the radio. At the same time, though, it is a bit of a generic melange, with sections that certainly fit together, but still, it has its twists and its turns. It's what makes the song work so well. It's hardly, for example, got a genius vocal melody, not that it's bad at all, but Bebop Deluxe's songwriting strengths are based more around having lots of good ideas and using them all at once rather than having one or two genius ideas and leaning into them. I think either is perfectly legitimate. As I said earlier, quantity can become its own quality, and when quality is also there as well, that's even better. So in terms of wider recommendations, I would definitely suggest checking out songs like Fair Exchange, Sleep That Burns, Life in the Air Age, Love is Swift Arrows, and Made in Heaven, all of which really lean into that do a bunch of really cool things in one song kind of vibe. And if you want to hear Bill Nelson just shred it up, listen to, well, he does it a little bit in virtually every track, but I would say listen to something like Crying to the Sky, which is a really chilled out kind of spacey ballad with a rip-roaring guitar solo that's constantly on the verge of feedback. Or something like No Trains to Heaven for something more straightforwardly bluesy. Honestly, just such an underrated band. Go listen to them right now. They are very cool. If you liked this episode, please like and subscribe. Every little helps. I'm still a very, very, very small channel, but growing all the time. And the more subs and views that I get, the more of these I can make. Cheers.